Folks, I hope you're all doing well today. I'm covering Matt Walsh, and I've already laid out a portrait spread for who he is really behind the scenes when it's just him with his family. A portrait spread uses 9 cards laid out in a 3x3 fashion, and they're Lenormand cards. I'm using the 7th Sphere Lenormand from Labyrinthos, and here is his central theme. He is symbolized by the whip. By the way, the man card that would symbolize him himself does not appear in this reading, which is fascinating. It suggests to me that he's much more about his ideals. He's much more about being now a symbol to his community than he is being his own individual. It's important that this is his central theme. Straight up, it's abuse. It is flogging himself, it's flogging other people, it's flogging his family, and I asked specifically about who he is behind the scenes. He's an abusive individual behind the scenes, allegedly for entertainment purposes only, okay? And because the whip lands on top of the house of the tree, that means that his abuse has grown over time, possibly because it is sheltered behind closed doors. And I'll talk about behind closed doors in just a second because that is relevant too. That's his central theme. At the bottom, on in the corners, he's got sun and he's got scythe. Right away, that tells me that at some point his success will end. And between those 2 cards is dog, loyalty, him chasing success. He chases, actually, it should be this way because the dog is facing the sun in my particular spread. He chases success at all costs, and that means that he sacrifices all kinds of things to get there, including himself, because he does not appear in his card does not appear in this reading. And this is interesting too. Scythe lands on top of the house of the scythe. Nope, I lied. That's going to be about... I'll get back to you on that. What does 9 mean? I'll get back to you on that. But he lands somewhere in a place where it's going to end swiftly. Just out of the blue, he says something wrong, he does something wrong, and it just flat out ends. And I'll get that 9 here in just a second, I promise. We've got house and bear on either side of each other. On the very top row, I'm reading the corners of this particular spread, and here is how it appears in my portrait spread. Behind closed doors, he absolutely dominates. He does not allow for different opinions, and it's ironic because while he is keeping things under lock, stock, barrel, and key and all that kind of good stuff, he is doing some kind of revolutionary work within his children. He's taking some real risks when it comes to his children that he's taking too lightheartedly. Key lands on top of the house of the clover. That tells me that there's reward for right now, but later on there is some real risk that his children could speak out against him. Key, whip, and dog are all in alignment in a vertical line. Him chasing loyalty revolutionizes, changes dramatically how he abuses others. It grows his abuse. That's how he sees himself as successful, and you can kind of see how he campaigns, how he gets attention online. He's discovered a way to monetize abuse of others, and it is going to catch up to him. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword, so to speak, and it doesn't mean in a literal sense at all. The pen is mightier than the sword, and his words have a whole lot of weight. That is going to catch up to him. So I did a little bit of research on what house the scythe lands on, and it's bouquet. Sorry about that from earlier, but this is definitely about the end of social circumstances. He chased this, and this is something that he kind of represses. He wants to be seen as the one who is dominant, who is in charge. He doesn't want to be seen as someone who has to chase. He represses this for himself. He doesn't admit this to himself, when if he were honest with himself, he might become a stronger person. I'm not saying a better person necessarily. I don't know that that's within his ability because he keeps getting rewarded for being this ultra dominant, abusive individual. This lands on top of the house of the tree. This has been growing. And with this lands on the house of the ship, which tells me that this has been a long-term thing, that before he even met his wife, he was already being the dominant alpha male, if you subscribe to that kind of thought. He was already being that kind of thing and not pursuing his insecurities. In fact, his insecurities are what leverage him up to this point. And it's so interesting that I look at this. Here you've got bear, whip, and sun in a diagonal pointing towards the past. And that talks to me about past influences. He's found success as an individual and with his team through being an abusive person who mashes out other people, who stomps out other people. It contributes to a sense of pride. It's kind of sad because when you look at his past, he found all kinds of success affecting this image of a family person. In spite of what's been going on behind closed doors, what he doesn't want other people to see, he still has some news coming to him quickly about something when it comes to his home. Possibly a divorce, a quiet divorce, quite possibly, because I feel like the wife signed up for him because she liked his dominant aspect. On the other hand, she's grown to dislike him more over the years, is what I'm getting from Spirit, okay? All allegedly for entertainment purposes only. She's getting more and more tired of his antics, of his behavior. It's like his social media persona is coming through at home, and it pisses her off more and more each day. Every time he acts out in his social media capacity at home behind closed doors, she's like, this isn't the person I married. And to a certain degree, that's true. But on the other hand, she was attracted to this dominant aspect of his personality to begin with, and it's just only grown over the years. But people are allowed to change, and I wish her the best of luck if she chooses to go for her highest good. And now I see, this is where I'm getting that divorce angle. In the diagonal headed for the future, you've got house, you've got whip, and you've got scythe. It's going to break up his family, quite literally. It's going to end his family. Eventually, wife is going to walk out with the kids and say, enough is enough. And it's going to be like, who's that ex-wife of Steven Crowder? It's going to be a little bit like that. I don't know if it's going to be like Ring camera footage or anything along those lines, but you are going to see stuff out of the divorce proceedings. If this happens, allegedly for entertainment purposes only, if it happens, you're going to see some stuff being thrown out there. And that's kind of what I see when it comes to house landing on top of the house of the writer. It's going to be clear to everybody. And I say it's sad because Hart, right here, in the past, lands on top of the house of the house. This was a family that he could have chosen to cherish, that he could have chosen to have compassion for, and being abusive rewarded him more than love did. This is kind of like one of those negative loop, kind of like negative feedback loop kind of people. He thrives off of it. He's a deeply destructive individual. This is in his future. He's only going to become more destructive, and this is where I need to tread carefully because Spirit just put something into my mind. The word is suicide. There's the real risk that Matt Walsh could commit, or at least strongly consider or attempt suicide, because he's got to go out with a bang. He's too embarrassed by what's being exposed. At the very least, this is like cutting himself off from the internet and just being so embarrassed that he retreats completely about what comes out. And there's something about the, and here we go, with the Nazi angle, right? There's something about the Nazi angle that's going to come out from behind the scenes, from within the home, and he's just going to be so humiliated and embarrassed that he's going to retreat, at least for a while. Commit social suicide because the side lands on top of the bouquet, because mice lands on top of the clouds. People aren't going to see this coming. They're not going to see his destructiveness coming, and it's going to be sudden. But he can't stand not being in charge, so I'm wondering if he won't choose to just go out with a bang. I hope that he chooses to seek help, but I don't feel like he's the kind of individual to seek help. I feel like he'd much rather be dead in his negative feedback loop than ever start to reach his best and highest self. Maybe that's work that he has to do for another lifetime. Not for this one. He needs to bear up under shame and humiliation in order to become a better person. Those are words from Spirit. No more for this one. Let us move into another question. That was, who is he really behind the scenes when it's just him and his family? My second question is, what does he not want to be exposed about himself? Since that's something that seems to be kind of a theme for this particular spread, I'm going to get into my Wildwood Tarot, and we're going to answer that question. What does he not want to be exposed? So, I've laid my Wildwood cards out into a Celtic cross formation. I don't use reversals personally with the Wildwood Tarot, but that doesn't mean that other people can't. In my opinion, the Wildwood is harsh enough that you don't need to use reversals. So, what does he not want exposed? In the center, you've got endurance. This is his children enduring what I was saying earlier. This is the children enduring the storm. Quite literally, there is a lightning storm going on in the background, and the poor kid's just waiting it out, waiting until they grow up in order for them to leave the situation. And I see Matt Walsh's wife, this is the crossing. She both assists the abuse because she condones it to a certain degree because he's the head of the household, he's the father, he's the husband, he's in charge even when he's a piece of shit. She both condones it, but to a certain degree, she protects it. Now, she's also the Queen of Bows, so she's a very powerful individual, and she can choose to pick up and run with her, what are baby rabbits called? Kits? She can choose to pick up and run whenever she pleases, but the question is, will she? In the past, something else he doesn't want to know is that his wife has had to protect their children from him, basically. He doesn't want that out there. It's kind of like she's kind of in a catch-22 position of her own making. It's interesting how his wife comes through in this particular reading because he's not as in charge as he would like to be. He's not in charge at all. Yes, he is, but when it comes to the children, he isn't in charge. She is, and they just are objects of his rage from time to time. I wonder if he isn't a bit of an absent father because he's so busy with his social media life. I wonder if he isn't an absent father. I definitely see them getting emotional love, compassion, emotional assistance from other people. This is other people being possibly other family members, some friends who see what's going on, are kind of sworn to secrecy, but not in like a contract or anything formal like that. But they know not to talk about this because it could possibly become worse for Matt Walsh's wife and the kids behind the scenes if somebody talks. And it may be that if someone talks, Matt Walsh will know who talked because it's kind of specific information. There may not be many people who can get into the home as it is behind the scenes. Really destructive environment. And I know that I pulled that up earlier with the 9-card spread, but this is like beyond the pale destructive. In the subconscious position, other people are generous, or they may affect an image of generosity to the people that they are favored towards. It's definitely about keeping up appearances, but also they have a lot of wealth that they get to enjoy. And that might be why mom kind of sticks around and doesn't run, is because what would she do about a job? What would she do about she's become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and it's going to be a severe adjustment for her, even if she wants to leave and make a better life for herself and her kids. It's going to be a severe adjustment for her to get used to this lack of abundance, because Matt brings in a whole lot of money, and we saw that. A fish didn't appear in my Lenormand reading, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't been systematically rewarded over years for the abusive angles, the abusive takes that he's observed, that he's used. This is interesting. In the advice position, Matt Walsh's wife is asked to leave and find a love relationship that suits her and benefits her, and find a replacement dad for the kids. Yep, wow. That's a lot, is what Spirit is saying, but it's what she needs to do. She needs to find an actual trad husband, if that's what we're talking about. If we're talking about trad wives these days, well, we need to talk about trad husbands. And she needs to find someone, here we go, who is willing to be a traditional father and husband. He needs to be the father that steps up, not the stepfather, so to speak. I don't know how attached Matt Walsh is to his children. I think that they're literally just trophies for him. Like, I reached this milestone, here are my kids, they're my trophies, right? Same thing goes for his wife. It's a milestone for him to reach. It's not necessarily something that he values or cherishes. He values their objectivity. He values their symbolism. He doesn't value them for themselves, is what I'm getting from this particular spread. And yet, he has no problem instructing other people's kids, and that comes about as a result of his social media influence. That is what that is pointing to, basically. Is not willing to bother instructing his own children, but other people's children, has no issue with doing that. Now, his hopes and his fears are of things moving quickly and of being targeted by someone that he's afraid of being. This is his wife. This is a female archer right here. And she's very, very focused. She's got her hunting dogs. I think that they're like for deer specifically, but don't quote me on that. They're a specific kind of Scottish hunting hound, I believe. So he's afraid of her because she's got some information on him. She has piles of information on him that would be deeply destructive to him and his career. And then I come back around to that social media kind of suicide, if you will. If that spread that I did earlier wasn't about his physical, actual material suicide, then it definitely was for his career. He is his own worst enemy here. He creates the noose, he puts his head in, and he tightens the noose and hangs himself on his own lack of compassion, lack of love, and straight up stupidity. The King of Swords, he is not. He is not an intellectual. He does not think things through before he just spits them out. The words come into his mind and he throws it out there. If anything, he's the King of Swords in reverse. His outcome is the World Tree, which is 21. This is the universe or the world, depending on what tarot system you're using, and that is the end of an era, and it's time to move into a new one. Whether he likes it or not, somebody's going to leave for a more traditional partnership. I really get the feeling that Matt Walsh's wife, don't know her name, is tired of things as they are, and whether she leaves for another guy or not, she's going to head out with her family, with her kids, and that's just going to be the end of an era, and there's nothing that he can do about it. It slipped from between his fingers while he was continuing to grasp on even more tightly, seen in that bear card in the Lenormand spread. Let me switch over to another question. I'll be right back. My next question was, why does he say the things on social media that he does? And it's interesting. I've laid out his Lenormand cards in a 7-card spread, And money doesn't come up anywhere. It's something that rewards him, but it establishes something for him. It establishes him as someone who knows what he's talking about, and it gives him some kind of credence behind closed doors with his family that I know what I'm doing. Look at all these millions of people who watch me. Why aren't you obeying me? Why shouldn't you obey me? I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm saying. I'm in charge here. And as you can see, he enjoys being an abusive prick. He enjoys establishing these kinds of revolutions, literally, abusive revolutions towards other people. He likes seeing pain. He likes seeing hurt. It satisfies some kind of deep sadistic need within himself that stems from childhood. It's possible that he grew up in a deeply abusive home, and instead of becoming a better person in spite of what he went through, he chose to double down and spread the poison onto other people. And when I say abusive home, I mean allegedly for entertainment purposes only. You understand? This is about him not clearly seeing what he represses. And now, again, here comes the dog card. He represses absolutely this idea that he's subservient to anybody. But make no mistake, he is. He is subservient to social media. Let's see. Well, this is loyal to lies because the dog lands on the house of the snake. It's absolutely to do with lies, to do with Satanism, if you want to come at it from that particular angle. Because the snake is associated with Satan tempting Eve in the garden, this is something that he's deeply seduced by. He sees how beneficial, how much money he can make from lying. And so he chases those lies at all costs, including the costs of his own soul. He doesn't care about that as long as he's getting that bag. Power to him, I guess, but he's leaving a tremendous amount of destruction in his wake, and I don't see this going on forever. Remember what I said earlier in that first spread, that this is going to end dramatically and messily. The birds didn't appear in that reading, but it's going to be a dramatic ending, make no mistake. This lands on top of the house of the clouds. He doesn't see this. He is absolutely blinded to it. He just does. Again, he's not an intellectual. He's a robot. He does as he's told, in a sense, in order to get that back, get more clout, for instance. He doesn't think too hard about this. All he has to do is turn around and bite someone else's ass in order to get what it is that he wants, and he's willing to do it. He doesn't have really a set of morals that he abides by. Just the only ethic that he abides by is, what does it do for me? Clout, money, then I'll go for it. Also, how does it satisfy his need for abuse? How does it satisfy his need for sadism against somebody? If not against his own family, against his own wife, his kids, then it's going to be someone outside of the home. People who are on the internet, for instance. There's a revolution growing, and it's partly at his hands, but it's not necessarily the revolution that he thinks. This is very much a kind of winning the battle but losing the war kind of situation. He thinks it's the opposite. He thinks he can lose the battle and win the war, but that isn't the case at all, because his family's going to be leaving him at some point in the future, and then they're going to talk about their experiences with him. So while he might be successful in some fronts, it's going to become a problem later on in life when his kids, and possibly his going-to-be ex-wife, speak out about how he treated them. There are going to be consequences for that. So there's something about his loyalty unlocking something deeply repressed. When he chases something down at all costs, there's something that it unlocks deep within him. And again, he's blinded to this. He just does. He's a dog that chases a car but doesn't know why and doesn't know what it would do if it caught the car, for instance. I hate to use this term, but in many ways he behaves like a bot. There is no person on earth who is a bot They can choose to rise out of their botness at any point that they like. But he doesn't want to. He's being rewarded for it. This lands on the house of the ship, which is about, has been a long-term journey. He has found a way to monetize abuse. He loves abuse from an early point, probably when he was a young teenager. Allegedly for entertainment purposes only, he has liked abusing others. It gives him a sense of power, seen in that bear card that we pulled earlier in his spread. He doesn't see the real risks that he's taking with his social media empire, his audience. He doesn't see what risks he's taking by spurring them on to abuse, by establishing himself as a deeply abusive character. He doesn't see that. But in spite of that, what he's inspiring are people who are going to revolutionize repressing their loyalty to people like him, or at least exploring why they are repressing that kind of loyalty. Let me be more clear with that. They're going to be exploring why they are loyal to people like him. It's going to unlock things for them, literally unlocking the coffin. And they're going to ask, why did I ever believe his bullshit? I don't want to subscribe to the abusive part of his rhetoric. That doesn't mean that there won't be some people who continue to follow what Matt Walsh says and continue to obey it, but then there will be lots of other people who question, why am I doing this? They're going to see how much risk is in there, at the risk of alienating other people. There's the risk that he will put them on their own journey of alienating themselves from others and continuing abusive cycles that needed to be stopped. And there will be plenty of people who stop and question why they were ever attracted to Matt Walsh's rhetoric to begin with. And that's where his empire, his tower, so to speak, starts to crumble and where it starts to fall down. Make no mistake, there will still be people who follow him, but there will be plenty of people in the future who won't, because they won't want his results for themselves. Let me get into another question. I'll pick up these cards and we'll keep going. So I'm asking why, or what I should say is, what was his soul put on earth in this lifetime to do? This would be if Matt was interested in actually making himself a better person. I don't feel like he's the kind of individual who sees a need for him to self-improve. I think he's more the kind of person to think of how everyone else can improve to make his life easier. I see him as a deeply selfish person, allegedly for entertainment purposes only. But if he were to somehow, for some reason, turn things around and start seeking his best and highest self, he was put here on earth during this lifetime to deal with his insecurities. This is a deeply insecure man about something, and I've laid the cards out in a portrait style spread. Even though they're tarot cards, I'm still using that kind of influence. Bring it over from Lenormand. So that's at the center of his reading, is he's a deeply insecure person, and even if he hadn't been Matt Walsh, the internet personality, the talking head, the pundit, then he still would have had insecurities that he was born with that he would have to deal with. It wouldn't change what home he came from, but he still has the opportunity. He still does, and it would have been better if he'd started on this journey sooner rather than later. I think that he's too far gone in many ways in this lifetime, and that points to him having to learn the lesson or start the process over again in the next lifetime. That's going to blow. On his top row, in the corners, we've got 3 of vessels and the woodward. This is about celebrating his strengths, and it's not just about celebrating strengths. This particular woodward is taking a moment to look at what's coming up in the future, but also to reflect on the past. He's holding a small cup, and I know that my camera isn't focusing the way I want it to, but he's holding a small cup, kind of meant to symbolize that this very strong individual still has emotions that are worth treasuring and taking care of in this lifetime. Matt Walsh sees emotion, sees kindness, sees vulnerability as weakness, and he loves to exploit it and abuse it. This is not his particular kind of spread. I'm asking what he should have done if he were not inverting his birth chart. This is what he should have done if he were to progress on his birth chart and make good on his Chiron wound. We're all walking around with a Chiron wound. We're all born with one. And this is, I wonder if there isn't something to do with this. If there isn't something in his Chiron wound that's connected to this insecurity. He might possibly have Chiron in Aries or something like that. Chiron in Leo or something where it kind of exposes who he is to the public when he least wants it to. Either way, whether he was working hard to be his best self or if whether he's this current person as he is now, insecurity, that Chiron wound would have still been there. It still would have been something that he would have had to have dealt with. Bottom corners, you've got, this is the Judgment card, the Judgment card in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, and this is the Eight of Arrows. This is about struggling. So struggling, he was meant to work very hard on up-leveling himself when it comes to his spirituality, when it comes to being a different person. Leveling up through his insecurities was going to be hard work anyway, and I don't know that he's ever going to be ready to do the work now that he has gotten so much fame from being this abusive individual who uses abuse to cover up his own insecurities. I don't know that he's ever going to get there, and possibly he's going to take that chance away from himself. We'll see. Depending on what his wife and children say in the future, he might never have this opportunity. Again, this might have to be something that he does in the next lifetime. But it was always going to be a struggle for him to reach out to others about his insecurities, to say, I'm going to be vulnerable in this particular way. Of course, it would have been better if he could have been vulnerable with the right people, but I don't think that he's ever been this kind of... I think that he made a choice from an early age to be abusive as a way to cover up his insecurities, and he's just dug his heels in further. Now, on the top row, between the Three of Vessels and the Woodward, we've got the Guardian. That is the Devil in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. And I feel like I talked about the Devil earlier today in today's reading. So it's interesting how it comes back around. This is something that he cannot conquer. He was supposed to conquer this if he was going to work on his insecurities and his vulnerabilities. And he can still choose to, but it's extremely unlikely now because he doesn't need internal work. He's perfect. He doesn't need to be vulnerable. He doesn't need to talk about his insecurities because he has none. And there is where the Guardian continues to stay up and keep the querent, keep Matt from progressing any further. Behind that skeleton, there is a tunnel, a hall where the person can continue on. All you have to do is realize that it's not a living creature anymore. You can push it over, and the Guardian falls, but as long as you're standing there afraid, scared to death of it, scared to death of discussing your insecurities, he's never going to progress. And also, we're never going to progress if we don't confront our fears about ourselves, about our insecurities. Ideally, he should have up-leveled himself and started over into the Fool, started a whole new journey, been a real leader instead of someone who needs to lead through abuse. Ultimately, people are going to recognize that if you need to lead by abuse, you're no leader at all. You're just temporarily pulling people along until they realize, until they grow up and mature, that you're not someone that they want to pay attention to. That was always going to be a struggle for him, is to become a new person, but sometimes we're put on earth to do hard labor so that the next lifetime isn't as hard for us. Absolutely, he's going to be repeating this karmic cycle into the next lifetime and into other lifetimes because he's spoken harm against minority groups, against people who can't necessarily defend themselves very easily. That's going to come back around to punish him in the future. I can see that much. So we're going to continue with these insecurity and... Okay. So Spirit is actually saying to stop right there, that he doesn't deserve any more discussion on this particular path because it's one that he's not going to take. It's one that he'd made a decision not to take a long, long time ago. I'm getting when he was like a young teenager. He decided that he was going to be strong in spite of his insecurities, and he wasn't going to deal with them, and he calls that strength. They're mocking him right now. I will pick this up. We will move on to my next question. Well, here's my last question. Why is he so obsessed with diapers? If you've paid even a little bit of attention to Matt Walsh, you'll just kind of see this theme of diapers consistently around him. And I wanted to know, where does the obsession come from? You can do your own research on... There are all kinds of people who have documented his obsession with diapers and grown adult men in diapers and his talking about it. Here comes the snake card again. There's some kind of he has a humiliation kink. That's where that comes from. The snake can be just as easily about two-facedness as it does about lies, and in very rare cases about wisdom. Wisdom could not be further from is not part of this particular spread, but two-facedness is. He likes to gather information on some people and their kinks, and he loves to humiliate them. And that is where he gets that sadistic, that abusive part of himself. There's something deeply fucked up about him where he loves to sense other people's humiliation, and it really gets him off. And that might be something that his wife consistently struggles with behind the scenes, is he wants the sex to be about humiliation kink. That is really what seems to get him off, and he might deny it, right? That might be something that his wife talks about, his going-to-be ex-wife talks about later on, and that might be something that his kids talk about too. Not necessarily the sexual arousal part, although that could be a thing possibly too. Let's get the spiritual manure out as fast as possible. But his kids might, and especially his sons, might talk about how he loved to humiliate them, to give himself a feeling of power, of prowess, of clout, of being in charge. This is not something that Matt Walsh sees. He doesn't think too deeply about this. All he thinks is, I could get some information on these people and use it to humiliate them later. He, again, does not think very clearly at all about why it is that he repeats stuff. This is just as easily about cycles and doing the same thing over and over and over again. No change, at least with the stork. That's about cycles, but then things change a little bit each time the cycle starts over anew. This, not so much. He is committed, in fact, to not seeing clearly why he's obsessed with humiliating other people. I get that he's kind of extrovert, and I'm not saying that because I want to shit on extroverts at all. We need those people in our life. There's a reason why we have balances of introverts and extroverts in our world. But with him, his extrovertism makes it so that he doesn't think very deeply at all. He's one of those shallow people who's like a mile wide and an inch deep. And that's all there is to it. He's got a humiliation kink, and he likes to see people in diapers because most of the men he's around would be absolutely humiliated if they were seen in diapers. And that's enough spiritual manure for one day. Y'all take care. Thank you so much for watching.